Please welcome to the show, Dr. Robert Epstein. Thanks for coming here.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
So, well, here's your website. It says pioneering research to protect democracy and online safety. So tell us what that's about and how is Google influencing our elections?
Well, I've been studying Google and other tech companies for more than 11 years, partly by running controlled, randomized experiments, presenting them at scientific meetings, publishing in peer-reviewed journals. And I've learned a lot about the power that Google especially has to shift people's thinking and opinions and votes and purchases and so on and so forth. And starting in 2016, I developed a way of doing to them what they do to us and our kids 24 hours a day. I developed a way of monitoring them, of surveilling them, and actually capturing the content that they are sending to real people. That's very hard to do, by the way. The system we first set up in 2016 was quite small, but with each election, we've set up larger and larger systems, and we're now building a permanent system in all 50 states. And we know without any doubt, because it's happened before, that this kind of monitoring system causes companies to back off on their manipulations. And we've done it before, and we're going to be doing this on such a large scale that we believe that these companies will back off permanently, both in their interference in our elections and in the kind of bizarre content that they're sending to our kids. By the way, I'm not a conservative, just so you know.
So when you say, so tell me what's the so you're talking about how Google, when you put something in for a Google search, how they decide to rank the information that they show you, right? So that's what you're talking about, and you're saying that it's nefarious and that their algorithm that does that is not neutral.
Well, that's an understatement. That when you start to type a search term and they're flashing search suggestions at you, they're already manipulating you from the very first character that you type. We've shown in controlled experiments that using search terms, manipulating search terms, we can turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into more than a 90-10 split without anyone having the slightest idea that they've been manipulated.
And that's just by suggesting Google search results to them that you can take a 50-50 split in the electorate and you can ramp it up to 90-10. And that's being done through the manipulation of the algorithm around Google searches?
Well, that's just the search suggestions. Now, once they show you search results, now that's another kind of manipulation. We have different names for these, and we've quantified them and again published in peer-reviewed journals. But now once they show you search results, they're again manipulating you because they know that you're going to click at the high-ranking search results, and if they support one candidate or one party or one cause, they're going to put at the top of that list links that take you to web pages that support their point of view. Now, does that shift everyone's opinion about things? Of course not. It shifts the people who are on the fence. It shifts the people who are undecided. And Google especially knows exactly who those people are. And those are the people who decide which candidate wins an election. Yeah. By the way, that's only 2 manipulations I've just mentioned to you. We've discovered about a dozen, almost all of which are exclusively under the control of Google and a couple of other companies. And unlike the normal kinds of influence that impact us, like billboards and TV commercials, all that stuff is competitive. But if a platform like Google wants to shift votes, wants to support one candidate or cause, there's nothing you can do. You can't oppose it with your own billboard. You can't oppose it with your own TV commercial because they control the filtering of those web pages, the ordering, as you said, the ranking of those web pages, the search suggestions that they flash at you, the answer boxes that they show you. There is nothing you can do to stop them if they're supporting one candidate or cause. But we have found a way to stop them, and that is by capturing all this ephemeral content, archiving it, analyzing it, making it known in real time what it is they're doing, literally showing you those manipulations. And when we do, they stop.
Really? Why? Really? I wouldn't think that they would care. Why would they care that some professor's outing what they're doing? Because what they're doing is really important to them, and it makes them a lot of money, and it helps shift. So why would they care that you do that?
That's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that question. You know, there was a professor a few years ago who discovered that Google's Street View vehicles were not only taking pictures of all of our houses and businesses, they were also vacuuming up Wi-Fi data in more than 30 countries for more than 4 years. Yeah, passwords, you name it.
Really?
Yes, and it was a professor type just like me who figured that out. He reported that to some federal agency. They went after Google, and Google claimed anyway to have stopped, and they got fined and they got sued. You know, believe me, there are times when they do care. And in 2020, we had so much data, we preserved 1.5 million ephemeral experiences through the computers of 1,735 registered voters in 4 swing states. So we were actually capturing real content that Google and other companies were sending to real voters. No way Google could stop us from doing that. We found such incredible bias. They shifted, we know for sure, more than 6 million votes to Joe Biden, whom I supported. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether they're supporting my candidate or not. I don't think a private company that's not accountable to the public should have that kind of power. It undermines democracy. It makes it meaningless. But let me finish. The point is, we had so much data that I sent that off to Senator Cruz's office. 3 senators that very day sent a threatening letter to the CEO of Google. And on that very day, Google shut off all of their manipulations in Georgia, which is where there were 2 Senate runoff elections, November 5th, 2020. They shut off all of their manipulations. How do I know that? Because we were monitoring their content through more than 1,000 voters in Georgia. And we watched them shut off all their manipulations, including the worst one, which is a partisan go vote reminder. They send off a lot more go vote reminders on election day to one party than to another party. And if you're not monitoring, if you don't have a monitoring system set up, you'll never know that they did that.
And so what calculation, what is the logarithm you use to figure out that I know you said something like 2.1 million votes were shifted to Hillary, not enough for her to overcome. But also you just said 8 million for Joe Biden. How do you figure that out?
Well, that's where the controlled experiments come in. Again, we've been doing those for more than 11 years. They're extremely rigorous. And they show us for any kind of manipulation what proportion of undecided voters can be shifted. So all you have to do for any given election is figure out roughly what proportion at some point in time of people are still undecided. And then we know with each given technique, and we detect those techniques with our monitoring systems, with each technique, we know what proportion of voters can be shifted. And then we just do the arithmetic. It's pretty simple.
Really?
And yeah.
And so no one talks about this in the mainstream news. Why do you think that is?
Because in 2019, I was asked to testify before Congress about my work. Until that time, for 40 years, I had had an absolutely impeccable reputation as a scientist and scholar. But I testified. I did my thing, whatever. And Donald Trump, good grief, tweeted about my testimony.
Oh.
Okay, then what happened was worse, because then Hillary Clinton, whom I had always supported, replied to Donald Trump's tweet with language I'm sure she was handed by Google's PR department, and said that Dr. Epstein said that my work had been debunked and was based on data from 21 undecided voters. I'm sure that came straight from Google's PR department. That got picked up by the New York Times and 100 other mainstream publications, and I got cut off, just like Dershowitz. I got cut off. I literally, even last week, There were stories published in Arizona because I testified before their state legislature. Even last week, there were stories saying that my work had been debunked. That's absurd. We continue to publish in the top journals in the world. No one has ever debunked my work at all in any manner, shape, or form. That's what happened to me, and that's why people aren't discussing this. But we're still collecting the data, and now we're building a massive permanent system in all 50 states. As of this moment, we have about 12,000 field agents in all 50 states. We're monitoring big tech content 24 hours a day through their computers. We're not just monitoring it, we're preserving it so it can be analyzed.
Well, how do you set up a system with 12,000 people? I mean, how did that happen? Obviously, you don't have funding for this, do you? Do you have funding for this?
Of course we have funding. We get funding from people such as yourself every day. We get sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of donations, small donations every single day.
Really?
And we get big donations sometimes from people or from foundations. We started setting up this permanent system late last year with $3 million. And we now have a system which has preserved more than 40 million ephemeral experiences on multiple platforms. That's the content they use to manipulate, and that's normally lost forever. 2018, there was a leak of emails. You can check it out. Went to the Wall Street Journal, in which Google employees were discussing how can we use ephemeral experiences to change people's views about Trump's travel ban. Well, my head spun when I saw that, because that's what we had been studying in our controlled experiments since 2013. And the point is, they know they have that power at Google, and we know now from leaks from the company and whistleblowers that they use that power strategically and deliberately on a massive scale, not just in the United States, but around the world.
So what kind of so now that you have this set up, do you think they're going to? Do you think that you've cracked their ability to manipulate elections like this because of your monitoring? You think that you can make sure that in 2024 Google can't do this?
Positively, because a system like this is remember Justice Brandeis's famous line about sunlight is the best disinfectant?
Yes.
And the other half of that quote that no one knows except me is that street lamps are the best policemen. And yeah, that's true. And the fact is that a large-scale system, when it's fully operational, it will make Google and other companies for the first time accountable to the public. They have never been accountable. This will make them accountable. We are just a few weeks from now, we'll be filing the first ever complaint against Google with the Federal Election Commission based on more than 2.5 million ephemeral experiences that we preserved in the days leading up to the 2022 midterm elections. We're being helped by a very, very prominent DC attorney who wrote a lot of the regulations for the Federal Election Commission. He said our data show unequivocally that Google is in violation of federal election law and FEC regulations. This is just the beginning. With the massive amount of data that we're collecting, all kinds of parties, members of Congress, AGs around the country, parenting groups, you name it, are going to be able to file lawsuits, are going to be able to start boycotts. There is, once you have the data, once you preserve the data, again, it's all this ephemeral stuff that's normally lost forever, but once you preserve it, they're stuck because they can't play these games anymore because we are catching them. And it's not just elections, it's our kids. This is our newest area of research. And I am so distraught. I have 5 kids myself, and I am so distraught by what we're finding. I can't even believe it.
What
I can't
are you
believe
finding?
Well, it's incredible. It's just incredible arrogance. It's hubris of these people. They are correcting kids, young and old. They correct what people are typing onto Google Docs to make it politically correct. On YouTube, they are addicting kids to YouTube by using the most heinous of psychological weapons. For example, kids are watching cartoons, and we're monitoring, by the way, now from the devices of real children. We're picking up this content and preserving it. the kids are watching a cartoon, perfectly normal, looks pretty standard and straightforward, and then all of a sudden someone's head blows off. Yeah, or someone just turns to dust, or I mean, horrible things happen. They last a half a second or a second, then they disappear, and then it goes on again as normal. But if you look at YouTube to look at what part of the video is the most played, you find a spike right there, right at that spot where that horrible, disgusting, terrible thing that's completely unexpected, where that happens, kids play that over and over and over. And that is extremely addicting. That's called negativity bias in psychology. That is extremely addicting. They are using, I'm telling you, the most outrageous techniques of manipulation. And they're doing this deliberately and strategically. And now, for the first time, we're capturing this content and archiving it.
So here's my big concern here is that the government doesn't run Google. Google runs the government, right? So
right.
Why would they bend to a letter from a senator when they have the money to buy those senators? And they do. They have the Congress bought. Google is the richest company, the most wealthy company in the history of humankind. So they've got, and they're in bed with the military-industrial complex and the CIA, all the intelligence communities. So it is fascism, right? So it's the combining of corporations and government is the servant of these corporations, not the other way around. Government isn't there protecting us. So why wouldn't they just use the government to make this all legal?
Wow, you asked really good questions. I didn't know this show was going to be so tough. But the fact is that they're also very data oriented. That's the answer. In other words, the reason why they've done all these things is because they've always gotten away with it, and no one's ever been able to show that what they're doing. So last year, the Republican Party sued Google because Google was diverting tens of millions of emails the RNC was sending out to its constituents and diverting all those emails to their spam boxes. So
wow.
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 Now that's the kind of thing we can detect and document and archive, but the RNC did not have the data. So their case got thrown out of court. But what we have been quietly building in the background here and improving now for years and years, what we have been quietly building, that's different. That's data. That they care about. With this, now I will tell you, I don't even know if I should tell you this. Should I tell you this or not?
Yes, you should.
I hope I don't regret it. I hope I don't regret it. But we recently found, I mean, we are amassing an incredible amount of data 24 hours a day. So just take my word for that. We're past 40 million ephemeral experiences preserved, and we're analyzing in real time. But we just discovered that we have 20 million lines of data that we've never even looked at because we couldn't make much sense of it, and we just made sense of it. And we just found out that we have from Google a smoking gun. We have from Google, we have content that in a million years, they never thought anyone would see. Because first of all, I never thought anyone would capture ephemeral content. That's the whole point of ephemeral content. It's ephemeral.
Ephemeral means short lasting.
Fleeting, it appears, it affects you, you click, and then it disappears and it's gone forever. You can't go back in time and find out what YouTube sequences they were showing. Now we're recording all that.
They even got to the Wayback Machine, but they didn't get to, wow.
They were recovering their tracks.
So they're covering their tracks from the Wayback Machine, but now you've invented a way to subvert that, and you can still capture the ephemeral data.
It's not just that, but what we've discovered is that we have captured some data, over 20 million lines of data, that I guarantee you in a million years, they never thought anyone would see. And it contains extremely, extremely incriminating content. And when we go public with this, which will be in the next few months if I live that long, but when we—
I was going to say, watch your back, dude.
Yes, yes.
Well, you laugh, but I
no,
did.
I mean it.
We mean it.
No, because I did a private briefing for a bunch of AGs a few years ago, and I told them, what we were doing and what we were finding. And one of these AGs, who's still, by the way, a state AG, came out to me in the hallway afterwards and said, "Dr. Epstein, I don't mean to disturb you." He said, "But based on what you told us, I think you're going to be killed in some sort of accident in the next few months." Now, I was not killed. I'm still here, but my wife was killed.
What?
How did that happen? What was the circumstance
of her death?
Yes.
Well, if you go to mistysdeath.com, you'll see a wonderful news story that aired here on Channel 7 in San Diego. Beautiful story, 2-minute video, absolutely gorgeous. Mistysdeath.com, MISTI, Mistys Death. And you'll see. I mean, it was a terrible car accident, but there were some suspicious aspects to it. And her vehicle was never examined forensically, and it disappeared from the impound yard. I was told it ended up in Mexico somewhere. I mean, very suspicious. And I still have not recovered from her death. I mean, I ask any of my friends or my family, I'm still suffering. But
I'm sure.
The point is that what we're doing is very important. I had a reporter from DC call me up, tell me he was doing a story on my work, called me up 2 days later, said, "I have to tell you this. I just got off the phone with a woman from Google." He said, I believe is high up or head of their PR department. And she screamed at me, he said. She screamed at me. He said, "I've never had that happen before. It's very unprofessional. And I want to tell you 2 things. Number 1, he said, you have their attention. And number 2, if I were you, I would take precautions."
So I think I'm going to end this interview and erase this video. I mean, I pushed back on YouTube and Google enough over COVID, Russiagate, Syria, and everything else. This seems like I'm really playing with fire.
You got like backup kind of dead switch stuff, right? I don't know what it is, but the thing that, if anything happens to you, it goes out public.
Right.
Set up, I hope.
So do you, now, you've been on bigger platforms than mine, correct? You've been on Joe Rogan.
Sure.
And how long ago was that?
That was last year. I've been on Tucker's show many times. Tucker did a full hour with me. I've been on everyone's show. I'll be out in Crowder next week. He's flying me out to Dallas.
Okay. I wonder it's going to be in. So now they know they can selectively bury videos on YouTube. They've done it before with my Dr. Robert Malone video that talked about what was happening with COVID. If you can you have to, the words you have to type into YouTube to get that video to come up is still unknown to me. It's hard, but somehow 800,000 people saw that video because it must have been passed around. That's the way you can find. If someone has a link, they pass it. And so that video probably would have got 5 or 6 million views had it not been suppressed the way they did. So I wonder if they're going to suppress this video. What do you think?
Well, that wouldn't be so bad. We just have to hope that they don't suppress us.
Right.
And I'm very worried about next year because when this system is fully built, okay, well, let's put it this way. The bigger the system gets, the bigger the threat it is to these companies because it will make them accountable to us, to the public, for the first time since they were founded. And that's how you make them accountable, is to surveil them like they surveil us, preserve, archive, analyze the data. That's what we're doing.
So this is also overwhelming. So I've been manipulated. Now, I remember there were some guys from like some tech magazine during the 2016 election. They came out and they had noticed this, that there was certain, if you typed in certain things into Google, it took you to websites that were pro Hillary Clinton, and it would be, and they had figured this out, and so it created a bit of a splash. But then, like a couple days later, they were like, "Oh no, we got it wrong. Somehow we got it wrong." Do you remember this? What I'm talking about?
Sure.
Was it like Gizmodo or something?
It was SourceFed.
SourceFed.
It's called.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did a beautiful video. It started to go viral on YouTube. YouTube blocked it after it had 1 million views. So they put a short version on Facebook, which got 25 million views, and SourceFed shortly after that disappeared. So yeah.
So wow. So these guys aren't messing around. So where do you get your courage from to do this? I mean, obviously
courage.
Obviously you've had a whole career. You probably could retire and have a nice life, but now you're putting a bullseye on your back, and you're doing that for the good of humanity, right?
Look, as I say, I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Republican. That's what I said when I testified before Congress. I really do believe, I mean, I sound like a Boy Scout, but I really do believe in this country. I think we have an extraordinary country. The fact that we can have conversations like this, the fact that I can even do research like I'm doing, this is an amazing experiment that our founding fathers created, and I believe in it. So all I'm trying to do is level the playing field again, because right now, the free and fair election is just an illusion. Google next year, without me, without the monitoring system in place, can shift in the 2024 presidential election between 6.4 and 25.5 million votes.
Wow.
So all I'm trying to do is just straighten that out, because they can still make lots of money without messing with our kids and without messing with our elections.
But it's about control, right? So the global cabal of capitalists who run the world now, just like Ned Beatty said in Network movie in 1976, there are no countries, there are only companies and the global transfer of dollars. And so that's why they don't care about, if there's a civil war in this country, they don't care. If they blow up another country, they don't care. It's if the companies that control those governments make money, and they are. And so now Google has an interest in Democrats. So you're saying they have an interest in the Democratic Party winning the election because, for whatever reason, right?
Well, they're not just a tech company. They also have a very strong, cultural norms. It was founded by, two utopians, and they hired a lot of utopians. And one of the leaks from Google about 2 or 3 years ago is an 8-minute video called The Selfish Ledger. And it's all about the company's ability to re-engineer humanity. They call it resequencing human behavior.
Oh, my dear God.
According to company values. I'm not making that up, because if you look up The Selfish Ledger and my name, you'll get the transcript and you'll get a link where you can watch that video. This is a kind of a crazy company. I mean, they think they know better, and right now they are controlling the lives of more than 5 billion people around the world. I know how to stop them. I've already been contacted by people from multiple countries on 3 continents who want their own monitoring systems. You have to set up systems like that. If you don't set up these systems, you'll never understand what's going on. These systems show you in black and white what these companies are actually doing to our heads and our kids' heads, which is even worse.
So how can people support you?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And that's an easy one. Go to mygoogleresearch.com. Mygoogleresearch.com. There are links to all kinds of videos, including the Joe Rogan interview. And there are links there where you can send in money. And we get people sending us money every single day. I don't know who they are, but I love you. That's all I can say. And go to mygoogleresearch.com. If you just want to know more about the monitoring system, go to techwatchproject.org.
So do you fear that they can shut down your ability to accept funds? Because that's the new thing, the new game, like Stripe and GoFundMe and Patreon. They've shut down people who are enemies of the establishment, or they perceived as a threat to the establishment. They just shut down their ability. Like the Gray Zone, GoFundMe, they had a $90,000 raise and they won't give them their money. So are you afraid that's what service do you use, and what are you afraid that they're going to do that?
We're always afraid. We're always cautious. We're always doing all kinds of crazy things to try to protect ourselves and our data and our revenue. We're also out there pounding the pavement, looking for big foundations, looking for wealthy donors who might, are interested in election integrity. So, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. But yeah, we definitely have some fear, of course. I mean, you'd be crazy not to have some fear doing what we're doing. But I'm not going to stop, because this is important. And plus, look at it this way. No one else is doing this. How can that be?
How can that be? So you think someone at Harvard or an engineering department at Princeton, or they're all co-opted by the big corporate money, right? Because they make big donations, and that's how they control academia and research, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And that's why no one else is doing this. And that was the thing that really got Joe Rogan kind of in a quandary, because he was really wondering, why are people not doing this? But it's because of the money. The money that flows into universities. Google is very, very generous, and they put a lot of restrictions on researchers too. So, we're the only group in the entire world that is doing this. And when you think how nuts that is, because in the EU, for example, the EU has fined Google over and over again, huge fines, which of course Google just brushes off as if it's nothing. But the EU has fined them. The EU has issued all kinds of orders and edicts, and you name it. Now they have a new law in place, the Digital Protection Act. But you know what they don't have? They don't have a monitoring system, so they can't measure compliance. And Google ignores every single thing that they tell them to do. You have to have monitoring systems. So
do you foresee the European Union contracting you to do that for them? Or
I've spoken in Brussels. I know people there. And when the time comes, my colleagues and I will be helping people in the EU to set up monitoring systems. These are not optional. These are must-haves for humanity, because as technology continues to grow crazier and crazier, and in many ways more and more threatening, you have to monitor so you know what these new technologies are doing and what threats they pose. There is no other way to find out. You have to collect the data. You have to do to them what they do to us.
So I remember last time I spoke with Bill Binney, who used to be an NSA codebreaker. He was going to Europe to talk to parliaments and government bodies. Was it about the similar things like this? Are you familiar with his work?
A little bit, yes. And I think he does have some similar concerns. And I think he has spoken to people there about similar things. And the point is, there are a lot of people in Europe who can act in ways that our leaders cannot. And Google has 5 out of its 13 data centers in the European Union. So the European Union could do them tremendous harm. That's not going to happen here. Our leaders are afraid. It's been in the news in the last few days. I'm sure you've seen it. Trial of the century, our government taking on Google with an antitrust action. It's in the court. That's complete nonsense. A total sham. I know for sure, because I watched how that legal action grew over the years and how it changed and morphed. And in my opinion, notice I said in my opinion, so I can't be sued. In my opinion, that legal action against Google that's going forward right now was designed by Google's legal team. It has no impact at all on the 3 big threats they pose to humanity. Number 1 is the surveillance. Number 2 is the censorship. And number 3 is the manipulation. This antitrust stuff is sheer nonsense. It's a show.
Yeah. You're talking Missouri versus Biden, right, Dr. Epstein?
That's a piece of it, but there's another in the courts right now is an antitrust action that's going forward. That's not the Missouri case. This is something new. And it's potentially, a big deal, except I'm telling you, it's actually a sham.
So, if I say that
I've left you speechless. Who has done that to you lately? Probably nobody.
I really do not want to see Dr. Epstein get Epsteined.
So Yeah, when I hear about the government going against Google, I'm like, this must be a show trial. And
It is.
because we all know the government is afraid of Google, and it's not the other way around. Google runs the government, just like the military-industrial complex in Wall Street. And we learned recently that Big Pharma also has a stranglehold on everything in our government and our media. They bought the media. So 70% of the news funding on TV comes from Big Pharma. And so that's why we had lockdowns, masks, mandates, and lies after lies after lies. That's why we had doctors telling you natural immunity wasn't a real thing. They had it because of Big Pharma money. Kurt, you want to say something?
Well, the thing that you said before that really stuck with me was the thing of, because I just was reading the transcript of the Selfish Ledger, which is a video you can watch.
Yes.
Not only is it crazy, they make Harry Potter references in it. It's sick on a lot of levels, but the idea that you're going to be resequenced to be more in line with their company politics, that's really what they call it, stakeholder capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
The idea the company's not just going to work for the company, it's going to work for the stakeholders.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of that, you, the stakeholder, who ain't getting paid anything by this company, are going to abide by their personal HR rules, whatever their CEO has in his feverish imagination. That's the scariest part right there. Is you're going to be abiding by the rules of companies you don't work for, or you're not going to have access to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a response to that?
My response is that, if I've opened your eyes just a little bit here, keep reading my stuff, watch what I do, because it's true. My stuff is buried, but there are people who are following what I do, and there are people who care, and there are people who get it. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care if mainstream has cut me off, because we're building the system. That's all that matters. And nothing has stopped us so far, and I don't think anything will stop us. And I will tell people again, please go to my googleresearch.com, because what we're doing is very, very expensive. I personally do not take a salary for what I do. I'm a volunteer, because that's how much I believe in what we're doing. And if people look into this, especially if you're parents and you're a little confused about what's going on with your kids these days, okay, then learn about what it is we're studying, and learn about what we have learned, and learn about what we're building, because we can stop them. You stop them by doing to them what they do to us. You surveil them. You capture the data and you make it public.
Wow. Okay. I wish we had more time to talk, but our time is up. Dr. Robert Epstein, I appreciate your work. Everybody should appreciate your work. I'm going to look more into this. I'm going to go to your website, and I encourage everybody to go to the website, check it out. And if you feel so inclined, support this work with a donation, because there's nothing more important than, I heard that there is something like 70% of people in America get their news through Google and Facebook. And I've been saying that for at least 7-8 years. And that's bad for democracy. When two outlets control the flow of information like they do, they can then control elections. And that's and you're saying that is exactly what's happening. And that's why when I would post all the stuff about COVID on Facebook, and then they would say it was misinformation, even though it wasn't. It was everything I've ever said about COVID was been proven right, correct, 100%. And they have fake fact checkers on Facebook. And so now everybody thinks accurate information is conspiracy theory because Facebook told them that. And so that's how they manipulate and control also, right?
Absolutely. If you go to carrierseparationplan.com, you'll come to one of the best pieces of scientific work I've ever done. And it shows a method for defeating COVID. And I worked this out in 2020. I was working with members of Trump's coronavirus task force. It shows a method for defeating COVID, which we had as an option in 2020, without vaccines, without lockdowns, without masks. It's real. This is not, this is published in a top peer-reviewed journal. It's real science. And the coronavirus task force knew about this. On July 15, 2020, I got a letter from my contact, an email, saying we've decided not to go forward because President Trump feels he can get the vaccine out before the election, and that'll guarantee him a win. And then, boom, all the resources shifted over to vaccines. So what you've been saying is absolutely correct, and they had an alternative that they could have used. There was a speech already written for Trump to announce it, and they had this alternative, and they decided not to do it. That would have saved more than 600,000 American lives. CarrierSeparationPlan.com. There's so much I want to tell you. Can I just finish with a beautiful quotation that you probably don't even know?
Sure.
You've heard of course, Eisenhower's famous 1961 speech, his last speech as president, warns about the rise of the military-industrial complex. That same speech warns about the rise of a technological elite that can control public policy without people knowing. One of the essays I wrote recently is called "The Technological Elite Are Now in Control."
And they are in control.
This is just things Klaus Schwab openly says, by the way.
Techno-fascism.
And so, do you? Okay, we got to go. We got to. We'd love to have you back on. There's so much more to talk about. Dr. Robert Epstein, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, tell everybody which website you want. You said 4 websites during our conversation. Which one should they go to?
Most important is mygoogleresearch.com. Jimmy Dore, you're really something. That's all I can say. You ask really tough questions. You think clearly. I think you're amazing. Thank you.
Wow. Well, that's high praise. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Tampa, Boca Raton, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, Indianapolis, and Levittown, New York. Wow, that's a lot of dates. See you there.